participatory event engaging in the reading of Frederick Douglass's monumental speech, The Meaning of 4th of July for the Negro. This event is sponsored by Peace and Justice, the Vermont Humanities Council, and Community Change. As we stand here this evening commemorating the 162nd anniversary of the reading of Frederick Douglass, let us not forget that the road to freedom and racial justice has been a long and arduous journey, with many gains, as well as many setbacks and losses along the way. Aside from the intentional genocide and conquering perpetuated upon Turtle Island's indigenous members, America has a debt. The fact that the foundation of wealth accrued in this country under the peculiar institution of exploitation and captivity of Africa's peoples is one of this nation's, if not its most egregious flaws. Every aspect of American life, North and South, benefited from the free market trading of Africans and their descendants. When Douglass spoke of the notion of freedom on the 4th of July in 1862, he made it very clear that a nation founded on the principles of rights and liberty and the pursuit of happiness for the common man was flawed. Africans and other peoples of color were not considered in the document on which July 4th was celebrated. The struggle for freedom cost many lives, including those black men and women who eagerly signed up for a civil war. Well, what does freedom mean? And what does it look like in this age of Obama? Well, if we look at the statistics, we'll see that not much has really changed. And if you are familiar with Frederick Douglass, he does cite this in 1862. Today, we have a system of racism. We could see the numbers in our incarceration rates. We see the failing numbers in our economic achievements. And we also see some dire numbers in our social issues as well, whether it comes from health or education, or across all spheres and all specters. African Americans, the descendants of former slaves, and those who weren't as well, have not fared as well as we would like to see. The 4th of July, I'm just going to share with you my own personal experience. I'm a descendant of African, exploited captive Africans. My great-great-grandmother was 12 years old at emancipation. For me, this is really personal. And when I stand here today, I also recognize the struggles and the lack of liberty and freedoms that they have. So let's think about that. Consider the issues that still plague our nation. As participants read through this momentous speech, I just want to say we can't come to any kind of healing until we touch base on our history. The history of a nation's economy founded on the backs of Africans and their descendants. Please remember that as we visit this 1862 document, and what you'll find is relevancy today. So let me begin. I'm going to start out the reading. Mr. President, friends, and fellow citizens, the task before me is one which requires much previous thought and study for its proper performance. The papers and placards say that I'm to deliver a 4th of July oration. this certainly sounds large and out of the common way. For it is true that I have often had the privilege to speak in this beautiful hall and to address many who now honor me with their presence. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable. And the difficulties to be overcome in getting from the latter to the former are by no means slight. That I am here today is, to me, a matter of astonishment as well as gratitude.
The purpose of this celebration is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. This to you is what the Passover was to the emancipated people of God. It carries your minds back to the day and to the act of your great deliverance. This celebration also marks the beginning of another year to your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. You are, even now, only in the beginning of your national career, still lingering in the period of childhood. I repeat, I am glad this is so. There is hope in the thought, and hope is much needed, under the dark clouds which lower above the horizon.
Fellow citizens, 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. The style and title of your sovereign people, in which you now glory, was not then born. You were under the British crown. Your fathers esteemed the English government as the home government, England as the fatherland, although a considerable distance from your home, imposed in the exercise of parental prerogatives upon its colonial children, such restraints, burdens, and limitations as, in its mature judgment, it deemed wise, right, and proper.
Peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men. They were great in their day and generation. Their solid manhood stands out the more as we contrast it with these degenerated times.
How circumspect, exact, and proportionate were all their movements. How unlike the politicians of an hour. Their statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and stretched away in strength into the distant future. Mark them, fully appreciating the hardship to be encountered, firmly believing in the right of their cause, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them. Your fathers, the fathers of this republic, laid the cornerstone of the national superstructure which has risen and still rises in grandeur around you.
Of this fundamental work, this day is the anniversary. Our eyes are met with demonstrations of joyous enthusiasm. The causes which led to the separation of the colonies from the British Crown have never lacked for a tongue. They have all been taught in your common schools, narrated at your firesides, unfolded from your pulpits, and thundered from your legislative halls.
We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and future. Now is the time, the important time. Your fathers have lived, died, and have done their work, and have done much of it well. You live and must die, and you must do your work. You have no right to enjoy a child's share in the labor of your fathers, unless your children are to be blessed by your labors. You have no right to wear out and waste the hard-earned fame of your fathers to cover your indolence.
Erected houses, constructed bridges, building ships, working in metals of brass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks, merchants, and secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are engaged in a manner of enterprises common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle on a hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in families as husbands, wives, and children, and above all,
would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty, that he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? Is it to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation, as a matter beset with great difficulty, involving a doubtful application of the principle of justice hard to be understood? How should I look day to day, in the presence of Americans to show that men have a natural right to freedom? To do so would be to make myself ridiculous and to offer an insult to your understanding. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him.
Examine like horses, see the forms of women rudely and brutally exposed to the shocking gaze of American slave buyers. See this drove, sold, and separated forever, and never forget the deep, sad sobs that arose from that scattered multitude. Tell me, citizens, where under the sun you can witness a spectacle more fiendish and shocking. Yet this is but a glance at the American slave trade as it exists at this moment in the ruling part of the United States.
Go ahead, Jair!
I was born amid such sights and scenes. To me, the American slave trade is a terrible reality. The fleshmongers gather up their victims by dozens and drive them chained to the General Depot at Baltimore. When a sufficient number has been collected here, a ship is chartered for the purpose of conveying the forlorn crew to Mobile or to New Orleans. From the slave prison to the ship, they are usually driven in the darkness of night. In the deep, still darkness of midnight, I have been often aroused by the dead, heavy footsteps and the piteous cries of the chain gangs that passed our door. Fellow citizens, this murderous traffic is today in active operation in this boasted republic. In the solitude of my spirit, I see clouds of dust raised on the highways of the South. I see the bleeding footsteps. I hear the doleful wail of fettered humanity on the way to the slave markets, where the victims are to be sold like horses, sheep, and swine, knocked off to the highest bidder. There I see the tenderest ties ruthlessly broken to gratify the lust, caprice, and rapacity of the buyers and sellers of men. My soul sickens at the sight.
But a still more inhumane, graceful, and scandalous state of things remains to be presented. By an act of the American Congress, not yet 2 years old, slavery has been nationalized in most horrible and revolting form. Mason and Dixon's line have been obliterated. New York has become as Virginia, and the power to hold, hunt, and sell men, women, and children as slaves remains no longer a mere state institution, but it is now an institution of the whole United States. The power is coextensive with the Star-Spangled Banner and the American Christianity. Where these go may also go the merciless slave hunter. Where these are, man is not sacred. He is a bird for the sportsman's gun. By the most foul and fiendish of all human decrees, the liberty and person of every man are put in peril. Your bored Republican domain is hunting ground for men.
Good job. Karen, go ahead.
Your lawmakers have commanded all good citizens to engage in this hellish sport. Your president, your secretary of state enforce, has a duty to you free and glorious country, and to your God. Do you do this accursed thing? Not fewer than 40 Americans have. within the past 2 years, been hunted down and without a moment's warning, hurried away in chains and consigned to slavery and excruciating torture. Some of these have wives and children, dependent on them for bread, but for this no account was made. The right of the hunter to his prey stands superior to the rights of marriage, and to all rights in this republic, the rights of God included.
Land you advertise, hunt, arrest, shoot, and kill. You glory in your refinement and your universal education, yet you maintain a system rooted in pride and perpetuated in cruelty.
You shed tears over the fallen hungry and make the sad story of her wrongs the theme of your poets, statesmen, and orators, till your gallant sons are ready to fly to arms to vindicate her cause against the oppressor. But in regard to the 10,000 wrongs of the American slave, you would enforce the strictest silence and would hail him as an enemy of the nation who dares to make those wrongs the subject of public discourse. You are all on fire at the mention of liberty for France or for Ireland, but are as cold as an iceberg at the thought of liberty for the enslaved of America.
You discourse eloquently on the dignity of labor, yet you sustain a system which, in its very essence, casts a stigma upon labor. You can bare your bosom to the storm of British artillery to throw off a 3-penny tax on tea, and yet wring the last hard-earned farthing from the grasp of the black laborers of your country.
Home is where the hatred is. Home is filled with pain, and it might not be such a bad idea if I never went home again. To your rosy beat, close your eyes to